With the recent explosion in the popularity of Punk, I found myself in a position where I'm maybe not wanting to play that deck quite as much as I normally do, which of course is a staple of the channel. It's basically what makes this channel as big as it is. So I will absolutely not going to drop Punk or anything like that, but I dare say there's more people than before who are maybe a little bit tired of seeing it. The next best contender that I would usually rely upon if I'm going into ranked other than something like Thunder Dragons is Swordsoul Kashtira. Swordsoul has forever been one of my favorite decks. It's the first deck I ever made a video on, and the Swordsoul Kashtira is a really unique take on the strategy that I absolutely love playing. This deck's an absolute blast. It is slightly different now than what it was in our previous video. We cut some of the fat. We actually introduced some new cards to the deck, like the Iris Swordsoul, which I thought was pretty interesting. We trimmed down some of the cards that were maybe clashing with the idea of the deck a little bit. And I think the deck is much more now in a position where it has its own identity, rather than just being a Swordsoul deck that has a bunch of Kashtira cards in it, right? So we're going to be doing a card for card profile at the end, explaining why cards are here, what the logic is, and everything about the deck. But we are, first of all, going to be showing off 4 replays where we absolutely just crush our opponents in winning and losing positions. Again, I don't want to show off only wins. I definitely, the deck isn't invincible, no deck is, and I do want to show off where it loses as well. But we have just some absolute banging games lined up here, so 100% watch the gameplay, and then you can catch the deck profile at the end. So if you're interested in this style of content or anything else that we do here, we do new videos or streams every single day. Something is going up on the channel, so if you want to hit that subscribe button, you're definitely going to be getting your value worth, considering it's free. You might as well, if you want to help your boy. And you can like the video if you enjoy Swordsoul Kashtira or both on this occasion. If you find yourself in a position where you're interested in showing a little bit of extra support and you want to and have the means to, you can of course join the channel as a member. Every single membership is super appreciated, and again, it helps sort of drive the channel onwards. It helps me commit more and more time to YouTube because I do definitely need to contextualize this with everything else that's going on, of course. So every little bit definitely does add up, and I appreciate all of our members. But yes, if you want to get involved in that, by all means, the button's right there in the description and the join button. But if you're not, subscribing and liking the video is more than enough. But anyways, enough of all this talk. Let's get into the replays. Alrighty, getting into replay number 1 here. I vaguely remember this being a mirror match, but I cannot be sure. We're going to start off our turn with Cashier Fenrir, and just like that, it eats a Veiler. That is one of the primary benefits of the Kashtira engine, just like in the Punk engine, where they eat your opponent's negates. They eat Ash Blossoms, they eat Veilers, Imperms, all of that nonsense. Absolutely crushing it there. Eating that Veiler so that the Moye in our hand is now safe to resolve. Fenrir doesn't care about getting negated. We don't care about getting Rise Heart. It'd be neat, it'd be a nice little bonus, but we don't care about it. Summoning the Moye gets summoning out our token, Synchronous Summon into, this is just the bread and butter Swordsoul line from here on out. We are going to get our search off of Chizao. We're going to get to grab a +1 off of Moye as well, just drawing into Emergence, just because we're better at the game, I guess. I don't know what to tell you. We're going to go for Emergence, grabbing Vishira from the deck. Any worm will do. We just needed another attribute in our graveyard so that we could summon out our Protos, of course. We just chose Vishira. It really doesn't matter what attribute you choose. Going for long one, summoning a token, Synchronous Summon now into Baron de Fleur. That keeps us safe from the likes of Evenly Matched, which is our main concern there. 1200 damage to our opponent, summoning out the Protos and making dark monsters impossible to summon for the next 2 turns. Setting an Imperm and passing. So they have to compete with a Monster Negate, Omni Negate, Floodgate, and a Banish from the Fenrir. And we have the Small World for follow-up. So let's see what our opponent has. They got that Pot of Desires. They're going to draw a bunch of cards. They're going to go for a Dara. Dara summoning herself to the field. And just like that, when they realize we're not going to take the bait, they give up. Some mirror match that was. And there you go. That just shows the power of Swordsoul Kashtira over regular Swordsoul. I do think genuinely that the Kashtira package does make the deck stronger. It definitely removes a lot of the vulnerability to a lot of the major sort of hand traps, like Imperm and Veiler in particular. It makes your opponent less likely or to negate the likes of a Emergence or something like that, because they may want to use their Ash Blossom on a Fenrir or on a Unicorn. And even in situations where they don't use it on those cards, well, that just means now you're getting access to a Rise Heart, or now you're getting access to a Birth, right? So there's no losing in that situation. You're either going to get negated, in which case the rest of your plays go off fine, or you don't get negated and you get to bring out some rank 7 BS to torture your opponent over the next couple of turns. So it's a win-win. But either way, let's get into the next replay. Alright, getting into replay number 2 here. We're of course going second this time, playing up against Punk. Punk has become an incredibly common deck lately because people are trying to find ways to utilize the now significantly weakened Kashtira, tier limit cards. They're trying to utilize ways of abusing Thunder Dragons and Pale decks in general as a whole through, of course, the Chaos Ruler. Case in point. Chaos Ruler is a ridiculously powerful card, and we have 0 hand traps, 0 board breakers, no hoes, no bitches. We're just going to have to raw dog this fucking turn and hope that we can turn this game around here based off of what our opponent does. They're going to go for the Plague Spreader and everything, hitting a bunch of cards off the top of the deck. They're going to add a Boxia to the hand, which I don't believe they've used this turn. They're now going to Synchro Summon into Baron de Fleur, and they pass here, which is very interesting. This is something that I'm seeing a lot in Ranked as well, where people don't know how to fully pilot these sort of pile decks, and they just sort of have at it. I think our opponent might have been able to go into the Hot Red Dragon Archfiend Abyss here, but I don't know. I don't know what they're playing at. But either way, all better for us. That just means I'm going to beat thine ass. Starting off with the Unicorn. Unicorn get activated, getting hit with that Baron right away. They're wasting 0 time in negating our Unicorn. Very, not the greatest play in the world, but it is what it is. We're getting now special summon out the Ecclesia, normal summon the Moyi, Moyi reveal Protos, summon out the token, and just like that, we're into our bread and butter, going for the Grandmaster. Grandmaster get searching, Moyi get drawing. We also have Ecclesia to activate at any stage to bring out an additional monster for any sort of synchro summoning. It was actually this exact game. We were not playing the Iris Swordsoul in this particular replay. It was actually this exact game that made me want to put the Iris Swordsoul into the deck. Just as a little side point. But yes, we're going to go for small roll, revealing Vishura. We're going to banish a card, banish a Vishura, grab the Adara, just so we have discard fodder off of our Longuan. Longuan going to drop the Adara, summon itself, summon out another token, go into another level 10, go into this crazy boards. And it's just, they just can't keep up, man. They just can't keep up. Again, did our opponent misplay slightly? Probably. Could they have played that better? Yeah. But the amount of follow-up and the amount of additional cards that we had was just incredible. It really was. And yeah, and games like this definitely makes me want to put the Iris Swordsoul into the deck, just for some additional interruption in situations where maybe you don't want to go into like a Taya, maybe a Dragonite isn't the way. The Iris Swordsoul can definitely be pretty decent. But yes, either way, let's get into replay number 3. Alright, getting into it, we are going second. This one was a bit of a slow burner here, playing against Punk yet again. Again, Punk is one of the best decks in the game. It always sort of has been, but no one really realized it until recently. Apart from your boy. We've been playing it non-stop, but again, now other people are sort of trying to get in on it, and they decide, you know what, they ain't going to play on their Max C, they're just going to pass. We hard draw into Blackout, that's fine. We go for Moyi, Moyi reveal Strategist. They're going to now activate the Tier Limit's Havness. Interesting. Havness then going to start special summoning while our Moyi is going to be bringing out a token. Of course, he mills a Siren off the top of the deck, as well as a Keldo, which is absolutely insane. He mills a Keldo and a Siren going into Kaleidoheart here. Kaleidoheart's of course going to be able to target our Moyi, shuffling it back into the deck. We are going to go for the Strategist here, dropping the Blackout, going to Synchro Summon now into our Baron de Fleur. Unfortunately, we don't have a ton of ways of taking advantage of the situation that we're in. We're going to do some damage. We're going to Baron de Fleur, pop the Kaleidoheart, then negate its ability to come back using the Baron de Fleur, which should hopefully shut down most of our opponent's ability to play here. And they did of course search for a monster off of their Xiamen, so we do need to be very aware of that, but it's not worth keeping that card around. We do need to get rid of it. So it is gone. That is fine. Into our opponent's turn here. We don't have anything worth bringing back off Baron de Fleur. Foxy Toon sending Kelbeck of all cards. Man just had everything. Milling a Havness, milling a Scream here, Chain Link 2. There's the Xiamen activating his Chain Link 3 to protect the rest of his chain from interruption. Not that we have any interruption to throw at him, but that's fine. Going to boost up the Xiamen to 1200, grabbing Celiac. Now going to use Havness to shuffle back 2 to fusion summon into Mud Dragon of the Swamp. Now Mud Dragon isn't that threatening of a card, but it is an extra extender on the board. Going to grab the Ogre Dance from the deck, normal summon in Diviner. Diviner send the Mudora. Now they're going to use the Magnamut, banishing the Foxy Toon, summon out Magnamut to the field. Get searching during the end phase. Ogre Dance tributing over the Xiamen, summoning itself out to the field. Now going for the Link 5 into the Underworld Goddess into the battle phase to take out our token, and now we have to contend with a Goddess. Our opponent probably could have put up a bit of a different board there, but they went the route of the Goddess. Very interesting. We grab Kashtira Unicorn. Kashtira Unicorn, special summon, activate its effect to grab ourselves a Cashier Birth. Unfortunately, Cashier Birth isn't going to grant us a ton here. We're going to use it to... again, we would have grabbed back like a Fenrir or something like that, but it's just going to trigger off Goddess. Of course, Goddess negating any effect that would revive from the graveyard, but it does allow us to banish his Cacalus at least. So we were just really trying to bait out that banish, and hopefully we can draw into something next turn. They are going to go for the Rhino Heart. Send Havness to the graveyard. This just becomes super painful here. Unicorn going to activate its effect to banish something from his deck, but then they got the Sulliek here to negate our Unicorn, so it just becomes extremely difficult for us to keep up with Tearlaments. Even post-ban list, they're utilizing the Punk cards to the best of their ability here to try and maintain their gas. Punk have turned against us here, so they have been going to the dark side and supporting Tearlaments in their reconquest of the tier list. Let's see if it's going to be enough in the long run. Is it even going to be enough in this duel? We've got one more card to find out, and we draw into Emergence here. Emergence going to grab us a Taya, but it really doesn't matter. Gonna go for Small World just to see if we can't fish out something useful. We go for a Protos here. Protos, of course, the idea is that it's got 3k defense and it may be able to buy us a turn, but they go Mudora to remove all the different attributes that were in our graveyard by shuffling them back in our deck. So now we can't even use our Protos because we don't have enough attributes left in grave. A very smart play from our opponent. He just knew that we were planned to counter it, and it really is just that easy. He played well. Very powerful deck in the form of Punk. Punk is definitely a lot more explosive than Swordsoul for sure. I often compare Punk and Swordsoul to being sort of peers, if you will, in terms of their playstyle, but Punk is definitely capable of significantly more, in my opinion. I definitely think Punk is a better deck overall, but Swordsoul's is very, very consistent and very powerful, and definitely not worth scoffing at. But either way, let's get into the next one. Alrighty, we've got one last replay here, going second against Dimensional Fissure set 2. Not exactly a great look here. This doesn't really give us any clear indication about what deck our opponent could be playing. Dimensional Fissure definitely upsets a lot of our potential plays for lethal here by banishing our worms from the graveyard instead. They are going to go for an Imperm on our Moyi here. We do have the cross-hit designator at least, so we can at least guarantee the resolution of the Moyi, which is something. We are playing into a relatively empty board, so I'm not overly worried about what our opponent has at this stage, so long as we can get some advantage going and hopefully push for a game here. We decide what we probably should have done from the start, honestly, is go for the long one. Gonna go for it, summoning a token. We're gonna use these two to go into the Baron de Fleur. First of all, we definitely should have done that. This is our 5th summon, so we are safe from Nibiru. Depending on what that back row is, we are going to pop the D-Fissure, so we can Synchro Summon using these two into Dragonite. That guarantees us a negate against the back row here. We needed to do it in that order so that Moyi would actually go to the graveyard to make our Dragonites negate live. At this stage, I sort of looked at his hand, looked at his resources, and thought to myself, there's no real threat of him trying to come back here so long as I can maintain a decent board state. So by putting up a negate, I'm going to mitigate the risk of this being some crazy blowout card, right? So Dragonite does come up here, draw one into the Imperm. Fantastic draw off the Moyi, swinging in for 6k. Not quite game, but I don't really believe there was a way for us to push for game there in that situation. I might be wrong. Maybe going into Grandmaster to search for... I mean, we wouldn't have been able to summon Protos because we don't have the required attributes thanks to our cards getting banished. I don't know. I don't know if there was a play for lethal there. If there was, I didn't want to go for it. Going for Unicorn here, obviously now playing, of course, the Kashtira cards. Kashtira do play relatively well with Dimensional Fissure, playing a more sort of stun-heavy version of the deck, which makes total sense given the format. D-Link and Punk are not going to like that. We are going to go for the Imperm on that, but they're going to summon a Baron de Fleur of their own, Baron de Fleur. So the Baron de Fleur mirror is pretty interesting. You really got to think and time it perfectly here. So, of course, us activating our Baron to negate theirs will be a terrible play. We do go for call by just to banish the Unicorn, just to see if we can fish out an easy negate, an easy pop. That'd be great, but of course our opponent doesn't take the bait. That's fair. And you realize it's going to happen next turn. Our opponent realizes how many steps ahead of them we are. So they're going to go for preparations here, bringing back their useless Unicorn, activating their Birth not doing anything. Then they pass turn here, and I think it's right about now where they do the Mavs. I was actually in the Discord voice call when this replay was happening, and I was saying to the guy in the call, I think it was Andrew, about how they haven't done the Mavs yet and they haven't figured out that they're behind in this Barone game and I'm going to win the Barone game. And then right about here, I think they figure it out. We normal summon the Taya, banish a card, summon out the token, and yeah, right there he figures it out. He's like, oh shit. The moment he activates his Barone Negate, he loses his Baron and we get to take out his Unicorn. So yeah, not great. We could also just have raw Baron his Baron, but I didn't want to do that because why would I when I can get 2 pops out of it instead of 1, right? If I wait until he activates his negate the negate, and then use my pop on something else, then we win, right? But I didn't want to preemptively use the pop because if I did that, then we might have put ourselves in a position where I lost my train of thought. So we didn't want to preemptively use the pop just in case our opponent was smart and tried to hold off and using the Baron. We did want to maintain the ability to pressure him into using the negate whenever it was suited us, as opposed to us waiting until it suits him. So it's just a bit of a main game when it comes to Baron Mirror. It's not really much, but it's like we've already got the Maxi minigame. Look at this, like the Baron minigame, right? Either ways, let's get into the deck profile. Scar, Claw, Kashtira. This deck is an absolute blast. I love playing this. Whenever I'm just sitting around and I'm thinking to myself, I don't know what to play, I don't know what to make a video on, one of 3 decks always brings to mind. Of course, Punk Kashtira, Punk decks in general. Your boy loves some Punk. Second to that is Thunder Dragon. Bestial Thunder Dragons. Absolute blast. I think I uploaded, by the time you're seeing this, I uploaded a video on it a few days ago, even though it hasn't come out for me yet. And the third option I would typically go to is definitely Swordsoul Kashtira. This deck's an absolute blast. We're going to start by removing the auxiliary cards, if you will. We've got the 3 Maxi, the 3 Ash Blossom. We've got the double call by and single crossout. That is your Maxi package. You have to play it. It is not optional. You will automatically lose if you do not play it if your opponent has Maxi in hand. Then we got the triple infinite permanence as well. Having room for the Imperm is very, very nice. Abso-freaking-lutely. And the last card I would consider a flex spot is the Iris Swordsoul. I really like this card. It didn't come up a ton when we were playing, but sometimes I was in positions where I had Ecclesia on the board and I didn't have anything good to summon out of Ecclesia because I either didn't have a Worm in hand to reveal for a Moyi, or I didn't have a Worm in Grave to banish for a Taya, and there just wasn't anything good I could do with a lone Ecclesia. Like, Ecclesia 4 hand traps does nothing, right? So by putting the Iris Swordsoul in my deck, I'm giving myself a card where if I have Ecclesia 4 hand traps, I have a card I can summon that's actually going to do stuff, right? Especially next to the likes of an Imperm. Now, the Iris Swordsoul itself is a pretty decent card. I'm pretty sure it special summons itself. Yeah, during the main phase, if a monster whose effect is negated, you can special summon this card from your hand. So if you activate like an Imperm or something like that, or a Grandmaster, you can summon this card from your hand. While it's face up, if your opponent special summons a monster, you can activate one of these effects based on where it was summoned from. From the hand, you get to special summon a monster of your own. From the deck, Pot of Greed. From the extra deck, destroy one of those special summon monsters. So it's a great tool for combating your opponent's extra deck in situations where you don't have anything else better to summon. And it's not a deck card in hand. It's an easy summon target off of Ecclesia. It's a Swordsoul card, which makes it a reveal and banish target and discard target off of all of these cards. I don't see a reason not to play this. But if you don't want to, you can cut it. If you don't want to, you can cut it. I just really like it. I think it's a really good card. Okay, so let's get into the deck. Let's separate it out into packages. We have Worms and we have Kashtira. Worms and Kashtira, those are the 2 packages. Let's start with Worms. Swordsoul, of course, we have the triple Moyi, double Taya, triple Strategist. That is your main sort of core, alongside 3 copies of Ecclesia and the singular Iris that we've already talked about. The 3 primary Swordsouls all basically have effects that summon out a Swordsoul Token. Swordsoul Token is a level 4 water tuner monster, worm monster, that you can use for synchro summoning. So long as that token is face up, you can only synchro summon from the extra deck. No link summoning, no shenanigans, no nothing. Only synchro while you've got the token, but it is a tuner to enable your summons. Moyi on normal summon or special summon will reveal a Swordsoul card or a worm monster in hand to summon its token. Taya will banish a worm or Swordsoul card from the graveyard to summon its token, and Strategist can discard another worm or Swordsoul card to special summon itself from hand and then special summon a token. Note that those are 2 separate summons, which means under Maxi, your opponent will draw 2 cards. They all also have effects that activate when they're sent to the graveyard for a synchro summon. Moyi will draw 1, Taya will send a Swordsoul or worm card from deck to graveyard, and Strategist will inflict 1200 points of damage to your opponent. Ecclesia can special summon itself to the field. If your opponent controls more monsters than you, it is a level 4 tuner, which makes it unique from the other Swordsoul cards because they aren't tuners. So you can occasionally use this just as a actual tuner, but it's more often than not, you're going to be using its secondary effect to quick play Tribute itself to special summon a Swordsoul card directly from the deck. So you're going to be summoning a Mo Yi or a Taya in most circumstances in order to summon out a token and start your whole combo off. Or sometimes if you're not in a position where either of those cards are useful, for example if you have no cards to reveal in hand or no cards in graveyard to banish, you may instead find yourself special summoning the Iris Swordsoul, which is of course a pretty decent card. In terms of the Tenyi monsters, we have one Adara, one Vishuddha, and one Ashina. They don't serve as big a purpose in this deck as they used to, definitely not. They are primarily small world bridges, which we're going to get to in a moment, but these cards serve primarily as bridges through small world that directly intertwines your Swordsoul and Kashtira cards. Your Swordsoul and Kashtira cards, you can use small world to banish any Kashtira to grab any Swordsoul, or any Swordsoul to grab any Kashtira. So the versatility it brings to your hands is absolutely incredible. So the Tenyus definitely, just one of each is enough. You don't really need to see them in hand, and you've got enough different copies to where you're not going to draw all of them, right? And even if you do, they're not terrible to have in hand either, so it is what it is. You can still bridge through these guys to get some stuff, thanks to the fact that these guys have decent attributes. Then in terms of we've got Protos as well. I should mention, part of our Worm package, we have Arch Nemesis Protos. Searchable card thanks to Emergence and the Grandmaster, so you can search for this as part of your primary combo. You summon it to the field by banishing 3 monsters with different attributes from your graveyard or field. Of course, we're playing a ton of different attributes. And basically, once per turn, you can declare a attribute of a monster that is currently face up on the field. All monsters on the field of that attribute are destroyed, and monsters of that attribute cannot be special summoned until the end of the next turn. Normally speaking, what you're going to do is you're going to declare Dark. Reason being, this card cannot be destroyed by card effects, and there's a lot of very powerful Dark decks in the meta, like Labyrinth, like Dragon Link, and those decks will not be able to special summon out their monsters, which is very, very good. 3k defense, indestructible by card effects, very difficult for many decks to deal with in a lot of cases, and in some cases it's just an automatic win. So this card, absolutely mandatory one of. A lot of decks even play 2 of it. If you're playing Desires, you can play Desires if you're a masochist, but I do not have the testicular fortitude required to see my Protos get banished every single time I activate it, so that's personal preference. Then we have Swordsoul Emergence. Swordsoul Emergence, grab any Swordsoul monster from your deck to your hand, or if you already control a synchro monster, you can instead grab any Worm monster in hand, i.e. Protos. You're usually going to either open this card up to begin your whole combo, or you're going to use it after searching for it off your Grandmaster to then grab your Protos. Got Small World, which I'm going to count as sort of like a midway package. Small World will let you banish any of your Swordsoul cards or Tenyi cards or basically whatever you want. You can banish any card to basically grab any card, right? The entire deck bridges into one another. So absolutely, this card is, I think, virtually mandatory, to be perfectly honest, in this version of the deck. I think 2 copies is virtually mandatory because of the versatility that it brings you. Again, the entire deck just bridges into the entire deck. Why would you not play it, right? Even the Iris Swordsoul bridges into everything. Like, it's nuts. So I see no reason not to play these cards. I think you'd be missing a massive opportunity if you weren't playing them. And the last Swordsoul / Worm card is Blackout. Blackout allows you to target a worm on your field and 2 cards your opponent controls, destroy all 3. If this card ends up getting banished, you get to summon out another Swordsoul Token. That's kind of useful sometimes, although it very rarely comes up. Primarily just here as a pop 2 and a way of dealing with floodgates. Now we've got the Kashtira cards. So we did slightly modify the package. We removed the Ogre, but other than that, everything else is pretty much the same because the engine works. Why would you change it if it works? We got the double Fenrir, triple Unicorn, 1 Rise Heart, and the 1 Cashier Birth. Kashtira, Fenrir, and Unicorn will both special summon themselves to the field if you don't control any monsters, which is ideal. Each also have a search effect and a banish effect. Fenrir will search your deck for a monster, i.e. your Rise Heart. Unicorn will search your deck for a spell card, which is your Birth. Fenrir, if your opponent activates a monster effect, you can then target a face-up monster that they control. You can banish that card face down. Unicorn, if your opponent activates a monster effect, you can look at your opponent's extra deck and banish any card in their extra deck face down. They can both also activate those effects if they declare an attack as well, but more often than not, you're going to be triggering them upon the activation of an opponent's monster. Rise Heart is the exception in terms of how it works. It is a level 4 warrior that you can special summon to your field if you control another Kashtira. That's what makes it such a good search target off of your Fenrir. It can also banish another Kashtira card directly from your deck to increase its level to 7 and banish 3 cards from the top of your opponent's deck face down. So that means that it bumps up to level 7, which enables a lot of rank 7 Exceed plays. Allows you to go into a lot of your Kashtira endgame, which is excellent. And lastly, we have Cashier Birth, which will allow you to normal summon level 7 monsters without tributing. That is, of course, your Kashtiras, plus your 2 Tenyi monsters, which is pretty neat. Doesn't come up very often, but it is neat. You can also, once per turn during the main phase, special summon back a Kashtira monster from your graveyard or banish pile, as long as it's not an Exceed monster. Excellent alongside the likes of your Rise Heart, because you can bring back whatever monster you banish off of its effect. And that is the entire main deck. Really not that complex. If you've played Swordsoul and if you've played Kashtira, it doesn't take a genius to bridge the gap, and Small World is that bridge. Into the extra deck, we've got Yazi. Yazi can basically pop itself on another card your opponent controls, and when it does, you get to special summon any worm from your deck. Pretty awesome card. Doesn't come up a lot in this version of it. Very, very seldomly will you summon this card, but it is definitely something that can be done, and therefore, why not? It is also technically a level 7, which does come up because you can actually use it to go into some of your rank 7 plays, but again, that's like seldom going to apply. Boxia. Boxia on summon will target cards on the field up to the number of different attributes of the worm monsters used for its summon, and you shuffle those cards back into the deck. And you can also pop a card you control to target a level 4 lower card in your graveyard and bring it back to the field. We got Draco Berserker. If your opponent activates a monster effect, you can banish that monster. If it attacks and destroys an effect monster by battle and sends it to the graveyard, you can gain its attack points permanently, and you can attack again. Each of those effects are only once per turn though, so you're only gaining one monster's attack points, but again, he's already at 3,000, he's about to get big. We got Dragonite. Dragonite, basically so long as you have a water monster in your graveyard, can negate the activation of a spell or trap card once per turn. Grandmaster is your main sort of synchro monster, one of your main boss monsters. It has 2 main effects. Number 1, when it's synchro summoned, you get to search your deck for a Swordsoul card and either add it to your hand or banish it. Most of the time you'll be adding it to your hand. It'll be the likes of Strategist or Emergence. Strategist, of course, to summon itself to go into your level 10 Exceed, Synchro, sorry, or Emergence to search your deck for Protos. Whichever one is applicable at the time. And its secondary effect, as a quick effect, you can banish a Swordsoul card or a worm monster from your graveyard or hand to target a monster your opponent controls, negate its effects until the end of the turn. So not only does it search when it's summoned, you also get to negate an opponent's monster once per turn, making this guy an absolute beast. I think he doesn't get the respect he deserves. This card is absolutely incredible, plus that art is beautiful. I would kill for a royal rare copy of the Shizao, absolutely. We did get a glossy though. Now, it is worth bearing in mind that you can only use one of its effects per turn, which means if you search, you do not get to negate that turn. Usually that's not a problem, but if you're going second, or maybe if you're a few turns into the game, that is definitely something you're going to want to remember. We've got Baron de Fleur as an ignition effect. You can target a card in the field and destroy it. Once while face up as a quick effect, you can negate the activation of any card and destroy that card. Very powerful generic level 10 synchro. You can also tag it out during the standby phase by shuffling it back into the extra deck to special summon back a monster from the graveyard. You'll usually do that because its negate effect is once while face up on the field, which means once you've used it, you're not going to get a chance to use it again. So you might as well shuffle it back into your deck to summon out a useful monster from the graveyard, like a Kashtira, like the Iris Swordsoul, that is actually going to do something on the field during your opponent's turn, right? There's that ice cream truck again. I feel like he's timing his rounds for my recording times. How dare. The Chang Yang is next. Chang Yang, of course, I'd say third most powerful boss monster. I do think the other one we're going to talk about is more powerful. But this guy, for each banished card, he gains 100 attack and defense, and your opponent's monsters will lose 100 attack and defense. He can't be destroyed by card effects. If he would be destroyed, you can banish a card from your graveyard instead. And if a card ever does get banished while this card is face up, you can target, well sorry, no you don't target, you can just banish a monster or card from your opponent's graveyard and one from their field. Amazing removal tool, amazing at pricing for lethal by boosting up your monster while reducing their whole field down. Yeah, Chang Yang is generally speaking an absolute beast. Then we got the Sinister Sovereign. Sinister Sovereign, if this guy's on the field and you Synchro Summon out another worm, you get to draw one. That's not really why you're using it, but its main effects are its other two. Once per turn, you can, if your opponent special summons a monster, you can banish one of those monsters, inflict 1200 points of damage. If they activate a spell or a trap, you can banish that spell or trap and inflict 1200 points of damage. You can do each of those once per turn, which means it is essentially 2 interruptions baked into one. Of course, the banishing of spells or traps mostly applies to continuous spells or traps or field spells in particular, because it is essentially, in those circumstances, a negate. It can also be useful in banishing an opponent's branded fusion so they can't recycle it, in banishing a card that has an effect in the graveyard, like a Chaos Space, for example. Things like that, where you're minimizing your opponent's utility. I wouldn't just like banish a random Monster Reborn, right? Because you're only inflicting damage, it doesn't actually affect the card's resolution. I would save that for cards that actually have value on the field, or need to be on the field, for them to generate any level of usefulness or utility. Then we've got the Psychic End Punisher. While your life points are lower than your opponent's or equal to them, this card is unaffected by your opponent's activated card effects. Once per turn, target a monster you control and the card your opponent controls, banish both, and at the beginning of the battle phase, if this card can basically gain attack points permanently equal to the difference between your life points and your opponent's. So this guy gets absolutely huge very quickly. He's primarily here as a sort of backup boss monster, backup out, sort of catch-all out to most boards, to most decks. He can be very, very difficult to deal with, especially in a pinch, and he's very easily summonable using any of your Swordsoul tokens or even your Ecclesia, plus one of your level 7 monsters, of which you run a plethora. We're running 2 Exceed monsters, Diabolosis and the Shangri-La. We don't often use the Exceed monsters because the Kashtira cards are primarily here to absorb interruption, so it's not common that we would use these cards, but they're very powerful when they do come up. Diabolosis will look at your opponent's extra deck and will allow you to banish a card from its face down by detaching a material, and during the end of the battle phase, during which it destroys an opponent's monster, you get to banish a monster from the graveyard face down as well. Once per turn, when a card is banished face down, you can banish cards from the top of your opponent's deck face down equal to the number of cards they currently have banished face down. So if they have 3 cards banished face down, you banish 3 off their deck. Right? And then next turn you would banish 6, so on and so forth. So definitely very good at removing key resources from your opponent, sort of shutting them down before they can even get going by banishing extra deck monsters that they may need to resolve their combo, or just diminishing their resources over a longer game. We have Shangri-La then. Shangri-La, during the standby phase, will special summon a Kashtira monster directly from the deck. I would use this card more often because I love having the Kashtira cards on deck, on the field. It's just very, very useful. They provide basically just an immeasurable pressure to your opponent where they have to deal with them, and that's on top of everything else that you likely have already summoned. Whenever a card is banished face down, you can also target an opponent's monster or spell or trap card zone, and that zone cannot be used so long as this card is face up. So you can lock up your opponent's whole board. You're not doing a ton of banishing face down, so you're not often going to lock up an entire field of monster zones, but you can lock down at least a few in most circumstances to really limit your opponent's mobility in terms of the amount of plays that they can make. And generally speaking, if you can keep it around, it only takes a turn or two for you to lock up their whole board. Then we got Monk of the Tenyi. Monk of the Tenyi can be summoned using any of your Tenyi cards. I probably would, if you wanted to make space for this, maybe cut this to 1. We're not using this nearly as much as we used to, thanks to the fact we're not playing the Kashtira cards as much. We're mainly using them as bridges. So you could cut down Monk to 1 if you definitely wanted room to play something else, but we're playing 2 of it. And lastly then is Shaman of the Tenyi. Allows you to discard a card to target a worm engrave and special summon it back. Works beautifully alongside tie-up. And essentially, if if an attack is declared involving a face-up non-effect monster, i.e. a Monk of the Tenyi or one of your Swordsoul tokens, you get to destroy cards your opponent controls. So primarily here to, in a pinch, proc a tie-up in particular is the one card that springs to mind. And definitely not necessary if you don't want to run it, but it's an SR, it's useful, you might as well. If you want to modify the deck, the first card I would take out is definitely one copy of Monk, because you're not going to be doing crazy sort of Tenyi link plays like you would in like pure Swordsoul. But you can technically, so I didn't have any problems with 2 copies, and it didn't really come up to where there was a card I was missing. So it is what it is. That's just my thoughts, my opinions, my build. You guys can do with that information as you will. Let me just throw the full deck list back up on screen. just so you can get another look at the full list. There you go, with all the hand traps involved. That's my list. If you got this far into the video, thank you very much for watching. I hope you learned something from it. If you did, like the video and leave a comment letting me know what you thought about it. And yeah, subscribe. Check out one of the other videos on your screen if you want to see any more really cool decks and videos that we cover on the channel. We do new stuff every single day, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.